The first time humanity reached out to the stars, it was with hope in their hearts. The Earth had long been united under one banner, and the people had worked together to achieve incredible advances in science and technology. It was a peaceful time, a time when humanity believed they could make a difference in the vast, dark universe. The first mission to the stars was nothing short of historic. Ships filled with eager explorers and diplomats set off from Earth, carrying messages of peace and goodwill to the alien races scattered across the galaxy. Among the first to meet the human delegation was a race of beings known as the Elverians. They were tall, slender creatures with glowing skin and advanced technology far beyond anything humanity had imagined. The Elverians had seen many civilizations rise and fall, and they had little interest in alliances or friendships. They were cautious and distant, keeping to their own. However, when they received the human message, they saw it as an opportunity. They believed that the humans' technological advancements could be useful to them, but they were not prepared for the humans' offer of peace. When the human delegation arrived on the Elverian homeworld, the mood was hopeful. Commander Elias, the leader of the human team, stood at the front of the ship, gazing out at the alien landscape. His heart raced with excitement and fear. This was the moment humanity had been waiting for. They had made contact. They were no longer alone in the universe. The thought that they could be the first to bridge the gap between two species, two civilizations, filled him with a sense of purpose. This was the beginning of something great. As the delegation disembarked from the ship and made their way to the meeting hall, Elias couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The Elverian city was unlike anything he had ever seen. Towering spires of glass and metal rose into the sky, and the streets were lined with strange plants and glowing lights. The Elverians moved with grace, their slender bodies gliding silently through the city. They were beautiful, but there was something unsettling about their presence. It was as if they were watching the humans, judging them from the shadows. When they entered the meeting hall, the atmosphere shifted. The Elverian leaders were present, seated at a long table, their eyes fixed on the humans. They greeted the delegation with formal politeness but no warmth. Commander Elias stepped forward, his voice steady and confident. He spoke of humanity's desire to join the galactic community, to offer their knowledge, their technology, and their support to the races of the stars. He spoke of the promise of peace and cooperation. But the Elverians listened in silence, their faces unreadable. When Elias finished speaking, there was a long pause. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then, the Elverian leader, a tall figure with sharp features and piercing eyes, spoke in a language that Elias could barely understand. His words were translated by the universal translator, but the meaning was clear. The Elverians would not accept humanity into their fold. They saw humans as a threat, a potential danger to the delicate balance of power in the galaxy. The words hit Elias like a blow to the chest. He had not expected this. The human delegation had come with peace, but instead, they were met with suspicion and fear. The Elverians were not the only ones who felt this way. Elias knew that there were other alien races in the galaxy, and if the Elverians, with all their advanced technology, rejected humanity, then there was little hope of convincing others. The dream of joining the stars, of becoming part of a greater community, seemed to slip further away with every passing second. As the meeting continued, it became clear that the Elverians had no intention of helping humanity. They saw the humans' rapid technological progress as dangerous, a threat to their own dominance. They feared that if humanity were allowed to spread throughout the galaxy, they would disrupt the established order. The Elverians, like many of the other races, preferred to keep to themselves, watching from the shadows as the galaxy turned in on itself. They did not want the humans' help, and they certainly did not want them as equals. Commander Elias could see the fear in the eyes of his fellow diplomats. They had come in good faith, and now they were being rejected, cast aside as though they were nothing more than a nuisance. But Elias refused to give up. He had seen the potential in humanity, the strength and resilience that had carried them through their darkest hours. He knew that if they could not join the galaxy as equals, they would find another way. As the meeting concluded, the Elverian leaders offered no farewell. They simply turned and left, disappearing into the shadows of their city. The human delegation stood in stunned silence, the weight of the rejection settling heavily on their shoulders. Elias knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had turned its back on humanity, but that did not mean they were defeated. If anything, the rejection only made them more determined. The journey back to Earth was long and silent. The human delegates sat in the quiet of the ship, each lost in their own thoughts. The message they had received from the galaxy was clear. They were not welcome. Yet Elias could not shake the feeling that there was more to this story, that the Elverians' rejection was only the first step in something much larger, something darker. He had seen the way the Elverians had watched them, as though they were not just assessing their technology, but their very essence. What was it about humanity that made them so fearful? And why had they reacted so violently to an offer of peace? When they finally returned to Earth, the human leaders gathered to discuss the next steps. The rejection had sent shockwaves through the planet. Many felt betrayed, while others believed that humanity should fight back. There were whispers of war, of retaliation, but Commander Elias knew that this was not the time for anger. It was a time for reflection. Humanity had been turned away by the stars, but that did not mean they were powerless. It only meant that they had to fight harder to earn their place in the galaxy. As the days passed, Elias began to prepare for what was to come. The rejection had sparked something inside of him, a fire that refused to die. He had seen the way the galaxy treated humanity, how they were dismissed, ignored, and feared. But he knew that humanity had something the galaxy did not: the will to survive, to fight for what they believed in, no matter the odds. The galaxy had turned away from them, but humanity would not turn away from the stars. The galaxy had made its choice, but Elias and the rest of humanity would soon make theirs. And when they did, the galaxy would learn what it meant to stand against the fire and fury of a species that refused to be cast aside. The victory over the Valkyrie was a turning point, but it was just the beginning of humanity's journey into the heart of the galaxy. As Commander Elias stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the remnants of the Valkyrie fleet retreat into the distance, he felt a surge of both pride and urgency. Humanity had proven itself on the battlefield, but the galaxy was vast, and many more challenges lay ahead. The Valkyrie were only one of many species that could pose a threat. If humanity was to rise to its full potential, they needed to strike hard, to show the universe that they were a force to be reckoned with. The human fleet returned to Earth, where celebrations were held in honor of the victory. But for Elias and his commanders, there was no time for rest. They knew that the Valkyrie defeat would not be enough to earn humanity a place among the stars. They would have to continue their campaign, and they would need allies. The galaxy was filled with powerful civilizations, and most of them had already made their allegiances clear. Humanity was an outsider, a newcomer to the galactic stage, and their survival depended on how they responded to the challenges ahead. A month after the battle, Elias was called to a high-level meeting in the newly constructed military command center on Earth. The faces of Earth's leaders, military officers, and diplomats were somber as they awaited his report. The room was large, with screens displaying data on human territories, fleet movements, and alien intelligence. Elias took a deep breath and stepped up to the podium. "We've made our mark, but it's not enough," Elias began, his voice calm but firm. "The Valkyrie were just the first step. If we're to secure our place in the galaxy, we must continue to strike back, and we must do it strategically." He paused, watching as the leaders around the table absorbed his words. He could see the concern in their eyes. The human fleet was still small compared to the massive forces of the galactic powers, but the victory against the Valkyrie had shown them that humanity had potential. They had a chance to rise, but it would require a careful and calculated approach. "The next phase is critical," Elias continued. "We need to strike at a more significant target, one that will send a clear message to the entire galaxy. We need to show that humanity is not only capable of defending itself, but that we can win against even the most powerful of foes. The room buzzed with quiet discussions as the commanders and diplomats debated the best course of action. Several targets were suggested, alien races known for their advanced technologies or their military might. But Elias had something else in mind. He knew that the human fleet had the capability to take on more significant threats, but they needed more than just firepower. They needed to send a message of strength, of unity, and of resolve. "I propose we strike at the heart of the Elvarian Empire," Elias said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of his decision. "They rejected us, they feared us, and they've held their position as one of the dominant powers in the galaxy. If we can defeat them, we will prove that humanity is not just a threat to be feared, but a force to be respected. The galaxy will take notice, and we will have the leverage we need to secure our place among the stars." The room went silent. The idea of attacking the Elvarians was a bold one, but it was also incredibly risky. The Elvarians were powerful, and their fleet was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. They had advanced technology that made even the Valkyrie seem primitive by comparison. But Elias was convinced that this was the only way to show the galaxy that humanity could not be ignored. "Do you realize the consequences of such an attack?" one of the diplomats asked. "The Elvarians will retaliate, and we could be facing war on multiple fronts. Our fleet is still not large enough to take on the entire Galactic Council." Elias nodded solemnly. "I understand the risks, but we've already been rejected by the galaxy. We've already proven that we can fight, and that we can win. We've shown that humanity will not be pushed aside. If we strike at the Elvarians, we are not just proving our strength. We're making a statement. We're telling the galaxy that we're here to stay." The debate raged on for hours, but in the end, Elias's proposal was accepted. The decision was made. The human fleet would prepare for a daring strike against the Elvarian Heartworld. They would hit fast, hit hard, and leave a message that would echo across the stars. In the weeks that followed, the human fleet underwent rigorous training. New tactics were developed, and advanced weapons systems were tested. The fleet was smaller than the Elvarian Armada, but they had one advantage. They were unpredictable. The Elvarians were used to conventional warfare, to battles fought with strategy and finesse. But humanity was different. They fought with a raw, unrelenting determination that no one could anticipate. Elias knew that the humans had something that the Elvarians didn't: the will to survive. The day of the attack arrived. The human fleet, now equipped with new stealth technology and upgraded weaponry, made its way toward the Elvarian homeworld. As they approached, Elias stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring out at the vast expanse of space. The mission was risky, and there was no guarantee they would succeed, but he had no doubt in his mind that it was the right move. If humanity was to prove itself, they had to act now. The Elvarian homeworld came into view, a sprawling cityscape of gleaming towers and advanced infrastructure. The human fleet moved silently, cloaked from the Elvarian sensors. As they neared the heart of the city, Elias gave the command to launch the attack. The first volley of fire shattered the silence. Explosions lit up the Elvarian sky as the human ships unleashed their weapons, targeting key military installations and power sources. The Elvarians scrambled to respond, their ships launching into the fray, but they were caught off guard by the speed and ferocity of the human assault. The battle was brutal, but humanity's determination was unmatched. The Elvarians fought back with everything they had, but they had underestimated the power of humanity's spirit. The human fleet, though smaller, fought with a strength that surprised their enemies. Elias watched as the tide of battle slowly turned in their favor. The Elvarians were pushed back, their defensive lines faltering. As the battle raged on, Elias realized something. This wasn't just about defeating the Elvarians. This was about sending a message to the galaxy. Humanity wasn't just here to survive. They were here to claim their place in the stars. and they would not stop until the galaxy understood that. When the last of the Elvarian defenses fell, the human fleet stood victorious. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The galaxy had received its first real lesson in what humanity could do when pushed to the brink. Elias looked out at the ruined Elvarian capital, knowing that the galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. Humanity had struck back, and the universe had just learned to fear their fire and fury. The victory against the Elvarians sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, and for the first time since humanity's rejection by the galactic community, Earth stood at the center of a new era. News of humanity's successful strike on the Elvarian homeworld spread rapidly, sparking both admiration and fear among the other galactic civilizations. The victory was undeniable, but with it came a price that humanity would soon realize was far steeper than anyone had anticipated. Back on Earth, the people celebrated. The victory over the Elvarians had proven that humanity was not to be underestimated. Commander Elias, hailed as a hero, stood on the podium during a public address, his voice filled with pride as he spoke of humanity's resilience, strength, and determination. But beneath his confident exterior, Elias knew that this victory was just the beginning of a much larger struggle. The galaxy had noticed humanity's actions, and while many now saw them as a force to be reckoned with, there were others who viewed them as a growing threat. As the days passed, the consequences of the attack began to unfold. The Galactic Council, a collective of the most powerful and influential species in the galaxy, issued a formal response. The Council had long been a bastion of order in the galaxy, keeping the peace and maintaining the status quo. But with humanity's victory over the Elvarians, the balance had been upset. The Council, now faced with the reality of a new unpredictable player in the galaxy, was forced to act. The first response came from the Draxian Empire, a militaristic species known for their vast war fleets and ruthless tactics. The Draxians had long held sway over the Galactic Council and were not pleased with humanity's sudden rise. They saw the human victory as an affront to their authority and a challenge to their control over the galaxy's future. The Draxians issued a series of ultimatums, demanding that humanity cease its aggressive actions and submit to the Council's authority. The message was clear. Humanity was not welcome in the galaxy's established order, and they would face consequences if they continued down their current path. Commander Elias knew that this was just the beginning. The Draxians were only the first of many who would see humanity's rise as a threat to their power. The galaxy's established powers, each with their own interests and alliances, would not allow a newcomer to upset the balance they had carefully constructed. And yet Elias refused to back down. He had seen the potential in humanity, and he believed that they had earned their place in the stars. They had fought for their survival, and they would continue to fight, no matter the cost. The human fleet, still recovering from the battle with the Elvarians, began to prepare for the inevitable confrontation with the Draxians. Intelligence reports indicated that the Draxian fleet was already mobilizing, preparing for a full-scale invasion of human space. The human leadership gathered once again, knowing that the upcoming battle would be their greatest challenge yet. Elias stood before them, his expression stern but resolute. "We've made it this far," he said, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "The Elvarians are a thing of the past. Now we face the Draxians. We can't afford to falter. If we show any weakness, the galaxy will see us as prey. But if we stand strong, if we fight with everything we have, the galaxy will have no choice but to respect us." The room was silent, the weight of Elias's words settling heavily on everyone present. The Draxians were a formidable force, and this battle would not be easy. But Elias's conviction was contagious. The human leaders, military officers, and diplomats all nodded in agreement. They would stand with Elias, no matter what. As the human fleet prepared to face the Draxians, they received unexpected news. A small, unaligned faction of alien species, many of whom had been oppressed by the galaxy's major powers, reached out to humanity. They had been watching humanity's rise from the shadows, and they were willing to join forces with the humans in exchange for protection and freedom from the galaxy's established authorities. The faction, known as the Sundered Coalition, had suffered at the hands of the Draxians and other galactic powers. They saw in humanity the same spirit of resistance, the same desire for freedom that they themselves had been denied. The offer was a lifeline for humanity. The Sundered Coalition ships, though not as advanced as the human fleet, were a welcome addition to their growing forces. With their help, humanity now had the strength to stand against the Draxians. The Coalition's ships were quickly integrated into the human fleet, and together they began to formulate a strategy to confront the Draxians head-on. The Draxian fleet arrived in human space just weeks later. Their ships were massive, built for destruction, and their war tactics were unmatched in their brutality. The battle that followed was one of the fiercest humanity had ever fought. The Draxians came at them with all their might, their ships moving with terrifying precision as they tore through human defenses. The human fleet, though smaller, fought with a relentless determination, using every advantage they had gained since the Elverian conflict. The Sundered Coalition ships added unexpected tactics and guerrilla strategies to the mix, keeping the Draxians on the defensive. For hours, the two fleets clashed in space, with explosions lighting up the darkness. The Draxians unleashed wave after wave of fire, but the humans and their new allies held their ground. It was clear that the Draxians had underestimated the strength of humanity's resolve. Elias, standing on the bridge of his flagship, watched as the tide of battle began to shift. The Draxian fleet, once so confident in their superiority, now found themselves struggling to maintain control. But the Draxians were not easily defeated. As the battle wore on, they brought in reinforcements, more ships, more firepower. The human fleet, now strained to its limit, began to falter. The Sundered Coalition ships, though brave, were not enough to turn the tide. It became clear that if the humans didn't act fast, they would lose the battle. Elias made a risky decision. He ordered the human fleet to fall back, pulling the Draxians deeper into human-controlled space. The idea was to lure them into a trap, to force them into an area where humanity's home advantage would come into play. It was a dangerous move, but Elias knew it was their only chance. The plan worked. The Draxians, confident that they had the upper hand, followed the human fleet into a sector filled with asteroid fields and hidden bases. The human fleet used this to their advantage, launching surprise attacks and ambushing Draxian forces at every turn. In the end, the Draxians, unable to adapt to the unexpected tactics, were forced to retreat. The human fleet, battered and bruised, emerged victorious once again. The price of victory was high. Many ships were lost, and countless lives were sacrificed. But humanity had triumphed against one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. The message had been sent. Humanity would not back down. They would fight for their place in the stars, no matter the cost. As the human fleet returned to Earth, Elias stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the stars. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity's fire and fury, but Elias knew that they had only just begun to prove what they were capable of. The price of victory was steep, but it was a price humanity was willing to pay. The galaxy had turned away, but humanity had answered with strength, and they would continue to fight for their place among the stars. The dust from the battle with the Draxians had barely settled when the galaxy was forced to reckon with humanity's rise. The galaxy's established powers had underestimated the will and ingenuity of humanity, but now they could no longer ignore them. Commander Elias, who had been hailed as a hero, stood in a quieter room now, surrounded by diplomats, military leaders, and strategists. The cost of victory had been immense, but humanity had sent a clear message to the galaxy. They were not just here to survive. They were here to thrive, to claim their place among the stars. The aftermath of the Draxian defeat was nothing short of a revelation. Humanity's unexpected victory had shifted the balance of power in the galaxy. No longer could the great powers assume their dominance. Even the most powerful species in the galaxy had been forced to take notice of the human resolve. Their fleet had outlasted the might of the Draxians, and with the support of the Sundered Coalition, they had shown that they could not be crushed so easily. But as the celebrations on Earth continued, Ilias could feel the weight of the coming challenges. The galaxy would not let humanity rise without opposition. The Draxian defeat had only bought them time. Now, humanity would have to forge new alliances and face new threats. They had earned respect, but respect alone wouldn't ensure their future. As the leaders of the galaxy gathered in secret councils, many began to whisper about humanity's next moves. Some were still fearful, while others saw an opportunity to manipulate or ally with the human race. The Council of Stars, the once powerful conglomerate of galactic species that had held sway for millennia, now had to consider humanity's place in the Grand Order. Ilias knew that the path forward would not be easy. Humanity had shown that it could win battles, but wars were different. The alliances that had been forged with the Sundered Coalition would not last forever, and the galaxy's major powers would soon look to take advantage of any weakness. The Elverians, despite their defeat, had not given up. They were a proud and tenacious species, and their desire for revenge would only grow over time. The Valkyrie, too, would regroup and rearm. The galaxy had only begun to learn what humanity was capable of, and its response to this new force would be swift. But Ilias refused to let these worries consume him. He had seen what humanity was capable of when backed into a corner. They had risen from the ashes of rejection and proven themselves worthy. And as he stood with his commanders, strategizing the next steps in humanity's expansion, he could feel the pulse of something greater than just military might. Humanity had ignited something within the galaxy, a spark of defiance, of change, of a new hope. The human fleet, now reinforced with the help of the Sundered Coalition, embarked on new missions. Their influence spread beyond Earth as humanity began to form new diplomatic ties with alien species who had previously been reluctant to speak with them. The message was clear. Humanity was not a passing threat. They were here to stay. As time went on, the human empire slowly expanded. Their victories were hard-won, but each one was another step towards securing their future. Every battle they fought, every negotiation they undertook, was a piece of the puzzle in their larger struggle for a place in the galaxy. The journey was far from over. Ilias knew that, despite their victories, humanity would never be safe from the galaxy's jealous rulers. But he also knew that as long as humanity fought with the same fire and fury that had brought them this far, there was no force in the galaxy that could stop them. One day, Ilias stood on the bridge of his flagship, overlooking the stars once more. The war with the Draxians was over, but the struggle for humanity's place in the galaxy would never end. The galaxy had turned away from them at first, but humanity had answered back with strength and resolve. And as long as they remained united, there was no limit to what they could achieve. The universe had underestimated humanity, but it would never make that mistake again.